Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Masters of Marketing. Today, we're going to be talking with a tech serial entrepreneur, a C-suite executive, a digital marketer, a nerd, self-proclaimed, and an advisor. He's going to be discussing how to do marketing for SaaS technology and how it all intersects to represent the way that we should be working today. Today, Eric Vardon is going to teach us how to scale your marketing efforts with AI. Eric, great to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me, Ross. Appreciate the time.
You're welcome. Excited to hear whatever stories you're going to throw out, and then we're going to grill you with question and answer, so be prepared.
Bring it on. All right. I've got a little deck here for some talking points. Is it okay if I share that and go through it?
For sure.
Awesome. Let's make sure I share the right screen. I've shared the wrong screen before. That won't be my story for today, but we'll save that for another time. So I think I just want to put a few slides together and then get into the main points here about scaling with AI. I think I am a nerd, but I am not an AI tech nerd, nor do I ever thought or ever think that I was going to be. But I've spent a lot of time being very familiar and comfortable with what AI is, and happy to get into questions about the differences between machine learning and AI. And everybody has some kind of AI, whether it's right or wrong, but we will all definitely be employing it in one way or the other. As we mentioned before, Ross, I said to do this all the time, and whether it's listening in on other webinars or participating in, the one thing that I have taken over the last few weeks and months is that it with any kind of recession or change in the market, there's always something that comes out of it. From my perspective, it's that represents us as other marketing nerds is really this new way to work. We use this analogy of the check engine light, but the story I always tell is, not everybody here is as old as me, and I didn't have to go through this, but I actually do remember checking spark plugs in certain things to make sure that they were ready to go. My old man, my father, is a car guy, so we'll save that. So I use analogies because it's close, but we actually used to check the tires, make sure our spark plugs worked before we got in our car and took a journey. And now, of course, we have our check engine light, which does that for us. So I think that as marketers, a lot of what we're still doing is very old school and very manual and still very checking the spark plugs. And so if there's anything that we can take from a concept for today, is that we're all going to go through change, whether it's in our jobs, whether it's looking for new career opportunities, whether it's reinventing ourselves into our next career phase. Either way, the whole world is going through this movement to a check engine light. So to center it into marketing, that's really what we're all about, and really what I believe. So what I talk about is often that shift of a mindset of anything that is repetitive or mundane in some respect, that we can put automation or AI behind. That's what's going to happen. And I don't think we need to be afraid of the robots coming in and taking over our lives. I mean, love watching movies, but the reality is that machines will actually free us up to do what we do best as humans, and that is to be creative and to think and to strategize. We all say we're too busy, we're all tired, we're all overworked. It's because I think that we're doing so much in the compound effect, especially in marketing and analytics, and the complex needs to track and move and be a part of the analytics, and the data is just so overwhelming. We have to figure out a new way to figure out our lives, because it's not sustainable. And so I think that's one thing to take away. So hopefully people have some other stories and analogies within that. I know I'd mentioned the campaign that we worked on, so I just wanted to touch on why that new way of working is relative to us. We polled through census-wide 301 agencies. For our other nerdy web friends, they'll know what the 301 is. It wasn't on purpose. It actually just happened that way. So that's a whole nother story. But we wanted to know within our platform if what we were hearing from our customers was resonating, or was the reality across the rest of the agency world. And we're going to extend this into direct brands. But what was interesting is that the 60% came back and said that we make 6 to 10 mistakes a week. And it seems high, and it is. But I think there's a separation for today's audience of, we know testing and iterating and failures are okay because it's part of how we learn. But to catch them before they become a mistake is actually a big differentiator. And so we want to help mitigate that. But if you look at what I take from this data that came back to us is it's not one thing that we as marketers are trying to fix. It's actually a lot of things with incremental change that's going to add up to this whole new way to work. And so when we think about our day to day, these types of issues that come up, a lot of them with tracking or with the targeting side, or issues related to the complexity that centers around that. But sometimes, it's credit cards, expire, or ads campaigns are turned on too early or left on, or landing page failures, or whatever the case may be. So we think about AI and what it can do, whether it's through digital marketing proper, or through CRM, or through whatever the case may be. The idea is that we can take a process, we can build a foundation around it, and then we need to look for the new generation of tools that actually can help optimize and make that a reality. And so in closing, before we kind of jump into my last sort of few seconds of my 6 minutes, is that I think as we evolve, it's these sort of 3 points, is that we can use automation when there are repetitive tasks, whether we need to build it or find something that exists is a big differentiator. That if we're looking as business and marketers, we don't need to always look at revenue coming from people. It can actually come from time savings, and that's just an old school way of thinking. And back to the whole point, especially on the campaign, is that less mistakes means either we're making our clients happier if you're an agency, or if you're a brand marketer, but your team members, your boss, even yourself, that you have something that can help you kind of scale and grow. So just to get into it, those are a few points that hopefully will get the conversation going.
For sure. I already have questions, and there's a couple from the audience for questions along these lines. The first one is, I worked in doing social media ads, and I left stuff on, so I know, for example, that things can go wrong. Do you have examples of why you're passionate about this, or any large thing you saw broke that you were like, wow, this company just spent $1 million by accident, let me fix this?
Yeah, I mean, it came from, I was the one that clients called to say, hey, your team did X, or your team did Y, or, why is there an extra $70,000 on my credit card this week, and somebody went on vacation and forgot to turn off a campaign. So it came from many, many, many years of personal experiences of never wanting those phone calls, and being on the production side of knowing just how chaotic it is. And, to also just hearing team members being overworked, tired, busy, frustrated, and really not able to do what they wanted to do. Our business of marketing is just supposed to be so much fun and energetic and full of, strategy, that none of us have that time anymore. And so we wanted to give it back. But yeah, I've got a long list of examples and stories.
Got it. What's your response to the question of, when you say something's repetitive, you should automate it? At what point? It's a spectrum of, it failed 3 times, I should hire a developer for $150 an hour to automate it? Or at what point do you make the switch over?
Yes. I mean, it's a tough question. I would say depends on the size of the pain. So you can have it once or twice a year, and it could cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars. I mean, so I think to me, it's a frequency as well as either a value or how you can attribute it to a mistake within your business. One mistake could cost a lot. It's depending on the business, it could be hundreds of thousands of mistakes, marginalized over time. I mean, it really depends. So I think that that's sort of where the level of humanness comes in, is to say, I probably know in my gut what feels right, that I don't have to do this anymore. And I think that's, at this point in time, without data, it's probably trust your gut.
Trust your gut.
Eric, do you build this into your product itself? Can you talk a little bit about your product?
Yeah, sure. So our product ultimately, like the whole check engine Lite, is you tie in all of your analytics, your Facebook, your Microsoft, LinkedIn, whatever it is your primary tools are. You set your goals. I know I'm supposed to get $100 acquisition costs for this brand or my agency or whatever. And anytime there's a nuance that falls outside of that, good or bad, Morpheo is going to know before you have to go digging. So the first thing is, you don't have to worry about the waking up, checking all my clients, make sure they're on pace, figuring out and correlating each acquisition cost, remembering and forgetting, because most often 10 other things come in, those ad hoc requests or issues. And so when you separate those two, they're actually quite related. The ad hoc requests and things usually are related to what you should prioritize. And so our tool helps with all of that. And now what we're really excited and working on is not only the why, but the what. What are the optimizations? What can I do? And how can Morpheo actually suggest what you can actually fix to adhere to those KPIs even quicker?
When you talk about suggestions, that goes into the AI aspect of it. I know at the very beginning you said, you might have said, I might have misquoted this, that you're not an AI expert, but you are using AI. So
Yeah.
can you talk a little bit about how you incorporate AI, what aspects of it you have become very familiar with, and or just due to the name of this talk, how people can incorporate AI, whether it's through your platform or something else?
Yeah, and I set expectations because if there's another doctor of machine learning on this call and he wants to ask me about our algorithm, I probably won't be able to do it justice. But and I used to be a graphic designer. You can be a designer, but really you're not very good at it. So that's just my setting expectations. So in terms of the way I boil it down to is though you can have machine learning. Machine learning ultimately is it takes a bunch of data. It crunches through it faster than you could, and it helps you make decisions. AI to me is always, I separate the two, where it can start to provide humanistic decision making or suggestions that can help me make decisions more quickly as a human. And then there's a whole next layer of sort of deep learning. Everything really is now, whether it's right or wrong, has been kind of encompassed under AI. And so that's really, what we do. And you're right, there are variations of statistics and machine learning within our platform. And then there are nuances of AI. That will be where the business goes. Most businesses that are delving into it usually have one, two, or three of those areas that make up their AI.
Eric, I'm all in on this idea of like this check engine light. The way that I tend to describe it is triggers and signals. And like, so if you think about data is stale, triggers and signals are fresh. The concern that always kind of comes into this play is once you're getting these signals, once you're getting these triggers, once again, your signal to noise threshold can be really difficult to fine tune. Do you have any strategies against that? Because you don't want 10,000 notifications that something occurred through but you'll also do want to be notified. And as you're collecting new data, you have a trigger, you have a signal. If it's utmost importance, of course, you can have a single notification. I wonder your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so you're right, and that was probably, I remember the first time a client said to us, "How do we turn this off because it's too much?" And so part of it is you want too much, but you also need to know when too much is right or wrong. And so we have different various levels of anomalies within our business, within our platform. So you can sort of choose over time what your threshold is. Each client is different. Each team member is different. Most often, I would say you want that level of noise at a start of a campaign or when the data is first firing for the first time, or it needs to learn. It's always going to flatten out at a certain point in time. I would also say, I heard this morning through a conversation of a sort of comparative or competitor to our tool, and they had questions of, their statement was, we can't turn it off, and they don't have flexibility to manage our notifications. And so, yes, you're right. There's definitely many options to help with that. The other thing that makes me think of is the layer of transparency that the noise actually makes is actually uncomfortable. So I don't know if it's as much as the volume, because usually you can manage the volume. Given a wider team of what those notifications can do, whether if it's an agency, for example, and you have accounts people, you have SEO people, you have digital marketers, you have web developers, all in the same, let's say, Slack channel, and you're all seeing these notifications, there's actually a shared learning in there if you really take the time and effort to wrap a process around that. But it actually makes everybody's accountability rise. And so I think it's actually, to me, it's less about the noise and it's more around that awkwardness of transparency. But you're right. You definitely need an ability to manage that threshold, because if the algorithm isn't smart enough to continue to learn and deal with the threshold, it could get chaotic.
Gotcha. So my question about transparency, and Jake, you probably also have questions. I had to do social media marketing, and people would see your data before it had fully come in and decide to turn off a campaign because it wasn't doing well. And you're like, there isn't even enough data here to be statistically significant. You're making a decision too early. Do you include statistical significance or triggers in your AI algorithms as well to make sure that if they offer suggestions, they are founded in very solid data?
Yeah, absolutely. I think for us, we were fortunate enough to be able to build and test our algorithm through in an agency with multiple types of verticals, businesses, small, large, all sorts of different integrations, B2B, B2C, et cetera. So our algorithm, I think, is fairly unique where it's had a lot of time to learn within itself. I'd also say, though, it really depends on the layer of whether it's the team, bosses, team members, or agency and client. You have to be very prepared to set expectations, because to me it's better to let everything go but to set expectations more properly within a team or an agency relationship of what they're going to see and why. uh, it's sometimes it's going to be right and sometimes it's going to be wrong. That to me is a level of relationship. So it's kind of on both sides. Know what the technology can and cannot do, its limitations, but also set expectations quite properly within those different environments, because you're right, who knows what could happen.
Gotcha. Okay, story time. This is
Okay.
professional marketing story time. Do you have a story of the best case, or not the best case, but the best story of using your technology, using AI in marketing, where maybe you didn't expect it to work very well, or you just expected a baseline and it was amazing?
So I remember I was going to tell a different story, but that's a way better question. It's more relevant. One of the first, so we went through a public or a private beta when we released our platform in late last summer. As we found a few key net new beta testers, ran into an early adopter in the other side of the world. We nerded out on LinkedIn, and he was happy to give us a month of his time and test it against a bunch of his data and through his clients in the U.S. in this example. And he called me. So he installed on Thursday. He called me and emailed me and then Slacked me, because we have a community channel, on the Sunday. And I was like, what is going on? And why is a customer slacking me? First of all, calling me from literally the other part of the world. And he said, Eric, I installed Morpheo on the Thursday night. We launched a campaign on the Friday, which maybe you shouldn't or should not do. I would never suggest it, but he did. And seasonal campaign, all sorts of things. And on the Sunday, he called me. He's like, Eric, I launched this, and our Morpheo sent the anomalies into my Slack, and I was on, because he's a business owner. He's like, I was on it Saturday afternoon. So it had one day, 24 hours of data, and he started to see all of these issues with the campaign performance. He's like, what is going on? Calls his developers, they didn't answer, call his team members. They took him 3 or 4 hours to get, I was the first to call him back. And I started to look through the data, and he actually beat me to it. He said, they had double tracking. The tracking was way off on, so back to one of our examples. He said the tracking was off. He's like, if I didn't catch this Sunday morning, I would have lost 2 more days, because I had a scheduled call Monday afternoon with this client to do a first weekend reporting on the success of this campaign. And it was hundreds of thousands of dollars. He said, Morpheo caught those issues before any of my team members, especially on a weekend, and the rest is sort of history. So that was the first time where I was like, he's like, you don't have an analytics or really a BI tool. I mean, I know you guys do that, but you're giving me a sense of security that there's always somebody or something else looking at my data. And it made him feel very, very good. And he was very thankful, and the client was happy, and all things kind of ended well. So there's my story.
That's a very successful story.
Yeah.
That's incredible. Having faced some of those same challenges, that's awesome. Like double tracking links and stuff like that. It seems like you just track a lot of things that normally people wouldn't track or know to track. How many of these things do you think people are already doing manually, and how many of them are you checking that people have never done before, but you've somehow found it to be a better indicator of success or failure?
Yeah, I mean, it's every business, every agency, every client is different. And so the answer will be variable, but we're all doing this manually. And so I think that it's almost everything. I mean, the funny part about the algorithm too is that when you do have the noise, whoever asked that question, is there's some sort of sense of peace in it, because you start to get addicted to the noise because you can see everything at a glance, versus you don't always know what to look for until you find it. It's like insurance almost, right? Like you don't really want it until you need it. But when you need it, you're very thankful. And so I think it's, the algorithm, the team, we're always expanding features and all these great things. our goal is to not just provide insights and those instant alerts and all those kinds of things. It really is to bring the optimizations to the next level. Everyone, I think, from a marketing, analytics, UI, BI, analytics stack, is trying to provide those insights and optimizations. Even at an enterprise level, there are some our friends at Adobe, whether it's Salesforce, Datorama, that have these anomaly detection or options or optimizations. Even Google's trying to get it. But they're not affordable for most of us as growth marketers in SMB, and that's really what we want to represent and provide a huge amount of value. So it's not just the craziness of the data. It's like, help me now reach these goals faster than ultimately possible before, because that's what's going to keep me in business and keep me growing.
Eric, this is great. There's generally like a founding story around kind of why you decided this tool and this particular product. Do you have a good story around why you started this company?
Yeah. So my business partner, co-founder, and I were up late launching a client website in 2012. He was doing the development side. No joking. I was tweaking some design stuff, and I shouldn't have been because it was late and our team was off, and I unfortunately could have hacked some Photoshop or whatever I was using at the time. And we're just sitting there going, this is ridiculous. We've been doing this, unfortunately, since mid-90s, and the process is exactly the same. It's all manual. And what's going to happen is we're going to launch this, and the data is going to tell us to change everything until it continues to optimize the way we want. It's like, why is somebody manually doing this when we could be or should be thinking about strategy and new campaigns and new creative ideation and ways to generate and resonate information or messaging? So that's sort of where it started, but like every business, it started out as a landing page sort of tool. It was pixel driven. Then we got into a framework that we built. And so it took many, many forms of what our tool was to be. But when we came to it, it's like, unless the data is smart enough to proactively think like as closely to a human as we can, or provide triggers that only a human can deal with, then until we get that right, we'll never be able to have contents morph and change for the desired outcome. And so that's the story. We always thought that if I was going to go to a website, Ross would see something specifically for Ross. Brian would see something specifically for Brian, because the data should be smart enough to do that. That's what we all want. That's what consumers want. So that's part of the goal. We just think we're a small piece of that pie.
Amazing. Okay, so how many clients are you guys at these days?
Off the top of my head, I think from a user perspective, probably in the 200 to 300 range.
That's awesome.
And doing well. And I can't get into specifics of accounts and agencies and how many users they have, but we're happy, and we just raised our money, and we're just starting to get into the acquisition side, and COVID's thrown a little bit of a hurdle in that, but yeah. It actually, back to the new way to work, is it's forced everyone to say, I wonder if there is a different way that I could do this. And that's actually been really good for us over the past couple of weeks.
All right. So if I'm running paid campaigns, why shouldn't I use you guys?
Why shouldn't you?
Yeah. In what scenario does it not make sense?
If you're a small shop and you've got a few clients and you can manage it, I would say you probably don't need to use our tool. But I always akin us to like pardon the time on this, but we used to say the antivirus, before every PC had it, we didn't. And like our marketing stack is, how can we not have something that is the engine behind us that is at least ensuring that nothing bad happens? So whether it's one campaign or many, my answer is you probably should, but you do need some complexity. You do need to have multiple campaigns. You should be spending, you should be driving sessions and growth. But there are tools in our platform that are good for us, fellow SEO nerds, et cetera. So we do try to solve a lot of different problems, but I think the complexity part, would answer your question, even though of course I'm supposed to say everybody can see value.
All right. Yeah. So being an expert like yourself, where do you go for the latest news in terms of like marketing, or who do you follow? Do you have like a particular influencer or somebody that's your guru or mentor that you would recommend to follow, or a community that you hang out in?
Yeah, I mean, right now I'm obsessed with everything Ray Dalio has done or said. So if you're in the market or just are addicted to why history repeats itself, I would say just ingest, any one of his books, webinars, or what he's doing on LinkedIn.
Did you see his COVID report?
Yeah.
Oh, that was amazing.
Yeah, I'll go in. I can go in that whole tangent of how amazing he is and smart, but he's just all very realistic. So, but it's such a generational thing, the way he sees through his eye. But anyway, I think I mentioned this to Ross earlier on the call, is I'm a subscriber to TechCrunch. I pay my $15 a month, and the crazy value of their webinars these days, with whether it's on the investment side or technology, human resources, like whatever, you can sign up for not a lot of money and get a ton of value. Outside of that, I LinkedIn, like wherever, I just, Crunchbase, TechCrunch, I would say probably is where I see it. And then it's a rabbit hole of chaos from there.
You said that you're also presenting a lot across line. Where do you find yourself presenting? Where do you like to present? And what other topics are you teaching about when you're on those presentations?
It's very similar conversations because we're focusing a lot with agencies and consultants and all marketers. It depends. Sometimes it's SEO driven. We talk about certain things within that that I believe needs to change with that world. Sometimes it's more marketing. Sometimes it's business. A good amount are actually customers that have podcasts of our tool that I know now and get along with, and we're trying to help each other out. That's been really great on both sides. So we do some of our own. I'm a YPO forum member, so I join a lot of those and participate as much as I can in volunteer time and hours. But I also proactively have my own growth hacks for reaching out to podcasters around the world and just trying to get our name and awareness out there and try to strike up conversations in different avenues. And you never know who you're going to meet. That's been a ton of fun.
Gotcha. That's a lot of great resources. Thank you so much for teaching us all the AI stuff you did today. If anyone wants to reach out and learn more about AI, SEO, agencies, social media, your story, where can they find you on the internet?
Yeah, just come over to LinkedIn, search for Eric Vardon, ERIC, V as in Victor, ARDON, or go to morpheo.ai. I'm sure we can all Google search and find me. So I'm always available.
Google? Is that a small startup or
you
something?
You can try that. Yeah, if you haven't heard of Google, I would give it a test drive. It's
okay.